Alright, so in that last video about spring sale recommendations, all of the games that were on that list were largely ones that I'd had a decent amount of experience with. By contrast, today's video is all about the games that I just personally picked up for myself that I was excited to finally try out, as long as I could get them at a decent price. So, some of these are games that you had recommended, some were ones that I'd had my eye on for a while but hadn't quite taken the leap on yet, and others were games that I did actually have on another platform but wanted to get a copy for the Steam Deck, which tends to happen a lot these days, but yeah, anyways, let's just go ahead and jump right in. The first game that I picked up was one that I was hoping would go on sale and mentioned as much in a video a couple of weeks back, and a lot of you pointed out in the comments that it absolutely went on sale, dropping from $40 to I think $3.99, and that is Bulletstorm. Bulletstorm is pretty much the poster child for bonkers action games from that late 2000s, early 2010s era. It's loud, obnoxious, colorful, but most of all I would say it's solid and brings a lot of new things to the standard first-person shooter formula. You'll be playing as Grayson Hunt, the leader of a Black Ops team under the command of Victor Serrano. After the grisly discovery that all of the targets you've been dispatching are civilians rather than, say, terrorists, you make it your personal mission to take Serrano down. The story isn't particularly remarkable, and I have to say Serrano's a little bit too, mustached twirly as a villain for me, but I will say that Grayson and his team do get a little bit more development than I'd typically expect in a game like this, especially considering it places action above almost everything else. Now thankfully that action is still an absolute blast over a decade later. The shooting feels great on its own, which is kind of important considering you'll only get access to about 8 different guns in your time with Bulletstorm. But it's bolstered in a big way by a range of additional abilities like sliding, kicking, or leashing enemies from a distance to draw them in close, and then continue the assault. It all fits together really well, and when you find your rhythm, Bulletstorm feels as arcadey and over the top in the best possible way. The controls did take me a little bit to get used to, as it's kinda weird holding any button other than the left stick to sprint, but that's a pretty minor complaint and one you can easily fix by remapping the controls. Naturally, Steam Deck performance is rock solid even with all of the settings maxed out, so if you're looking for some over-the-top action with an addictive gameplay loop, Bulletstorm should definitely be on your radar for the next sale if you didn't grab it during this one. Next up is a game that I'd all but abandoned a few years back on the Switch, however it landed back on my radar after getting a Castlevania-themed expansion recently, and that is Dead Cells. Now again, I already played a fair amount of Dead Cells on the Switch, and I loved everything about it. The style, the punishing but fair difficulty, a constant sense of progression tempting you to do just one more run. It's just a really good time, and finally coming back to it after a pretty long hiatus was a real treat even without the Castlevania expansion. But I will say that the Castlevania portion is every bit as entertaining as the base game, and it also has Dead Cells' signature sense of humor applied to it, which is a huge bonus for me. Plus, considering Dead Cells is a 2D roguelike Metroidvania, it's perfectly appropriate and completely awesome that Castlevania has a canonized presence in Dead Cells now. If you're completely unfamiliar, in Dead Cells you'll play as the prisoner, and every time you die you'll start your run all over again. As you take down enemies and collect their cells, you can spend them as currency for permanent upgrades. This makes each run a little bit easier each time you pass through the loop into a new randomly generated level layout to begin your quest again. It's fast, fun, and thanks to its random nature, no two runs ever really feel the same as you find new weapons, abilities, and mutations to tweak your playstyle. In one run you might focus on ranged combat and utility attacks, while another may find you favoring up close and personal melee styles. It has a lot of flexibility and even more challenge. As a 2D affair, it's butter smooth on the deck, and you can get a ton of battery life as well. But beyond just technically running well, its emphasis on multiple runs makes it perfectly suited to pick up and play sessions on the Steam Deck, and I expect that moving forward this will be one of those games that I just leave installed permanently so that I can dive in here and there and at least make a little bit of progress. Next up is Anno Mutation M. I am positive I'm just completely butchering the name of this game, but it had popped up on my recommended feed more than a few times whenever I was just navigating the Steam store, and I thought it looked interesting, and I sure don't mind like a cyberpunk sort of setting, but I wasn't quite willing to roll the dice at $24.99. But when I saw it went on sale for $14.99, I decided I was going to go ahead and take the leap on this one, and I'm really glad I did because this looks really promising to me. Now admittedly I've only scratched the surface of its combat offerings, but the characters I've met so far are interesting and there are really vivid environments to run around in. Plus exploring those environments is inherently kind of interesting considering it's a 2.5D title where you're constantly running into and out of the background to explore from a fixed camera perspective. Again, I'm still super early in this game, so I really don't have a whole lot that I can say about it just yet. All I can say is that the game is really pretty, the characters are very interesting to me, and I expect that I'm going to have a really good time with this one. I mean, assuming the combat holds up, which at least in the tutorial, it definitely does. In short, I'm already hooked on this game and very curious to learn more about our main character Anna and the disease that afflicts her, and also to just start dissecting which groups are at play in this cyberpunk world, again, told in a 2.5D setting, which really pops on the Steam Deck. And speaking of sci-fi worlds, this next one I have spent more time with than I did Anno Mutation M. Again, pretty sure I'm still butchering that title. But this was a game that I definitely backburnered back around 2017, I want to say, and I think I did so for two reasons. But the game that I'm talking about is Prey. And I think the first reason I sort of passed on it at the time was the fact that I played and really enjoyed the 2006 version of Prey on the Xbox 360, and I was kind of disappointed to learn that this version of Prey really didn't have anything to do with that one aside from the presence of aliens and having a science fiction setting. And the other major reason I am positive that I did not give this game its due is that it came out in 2017, I believe around May, which would have put it right around the same time that the Nintendo Switch launched, and when that system came out, all I was doing was playing Breath of the Wild, and I'm pretty sure I disregarded everything that was not Nintendo Switch at the time. But now that the game was on sale, I was able to jump back in, and again, really glad that I revisited it here because it's turning out to be an incredibly fun time. There's an incredible attention to detail, and even though it's over 5 years old at this point, it really holds up well visually with solid-looking characters and lip syncing, and some really thoughtful level design. I seriously spent about 15 minutes straight just exploring Morgan's apartment before soldiering on, just to learn more about his character and the world that this takes place in. And I feel like that bears mentioning because I feel like they got the look and feel of technology just right for a game that is allegedly set in the year 2032. It feels just advanced enough beyond current tech without feeling ridiculous, which immediately makes the whole thing feel really grounded. Well, until this happens.
Oh my god! Security! Security!
The whole setup for Morgan's adventure is completely fascinating, and once it gets going, the paranoia really sets in as you start wondering what threat is hiding in wait for you. It all has a very Bioshock feel to it, complete with a wrench as your starting weapon, and from everything I've seen so far, Prey is definitely shaping up to be an intriguing adventure at the very least. Alright, so those first entries were kind of higher octane affairs, but let's chill things down a little bit with some more relaxing games that I picked up, starting with Farm Together. Now, I played this game pretty extensively on the Nintendo Switch previously, but when I saw it drop down to $9.99 for the PC version, I just had to have it. Farm Together is immediately off-putting because it looks like some jank mobile game or something you'd see pop up on your Facebook feed around 2012 or so. But I would encourage you not to be dismissive and definitely give this one a chance if you enjoy chill-out games that don't put a ton of pressure on the player. It is almost exclusively about farming and really just laying out your ranch in a pleasing way that is not too dissimilar from Animal Crossing. There are no failure conditions, and the only time you're really up against the clock is if the seasons change because you can only plant certain crops during particular seasons. But even then, seasons only last for 17 minutes, so you never really feel under the gun and can really just make the most of your little farm either solo or with friends at whatever pace makes sense to you. Want to jump in for a few minutes and check on your eggplants? Go for it. Want to settle in for a 3-hour marathon session of creative landscaping? And Farm Together feels just as good in long form. And while it played just fine on the Nintendo Switch when I first checked this game out, it really looks great here, and even pushing all the visual effects up to the top will see you keeping a mostly consistent 60 FPS. Although even when it does dip, it's not like you're in any real danger of missing out because, again, you're not exactly facing down hordes of zombies here, and you'll never really be moving any faster than your tractor's top speed, so yeah, in short, it's an excellent game in its own right, but it's also a charmingly chill agricultural sim for your deck as well. Next up is a game I was positive somebody had recommended in the comments here, and I went back and looked through all the screenshots that I take and just did text searches to see, who had recommended this game, and I could not find it anywhere. So if you're somebody who dropped this in the comments and I couldn't find it, I'm sorry, but I'm sure glad that I played it, and that is Little Gator Game. Now, I had zero familiarity with this except for seeing an adorable gator periodically pop up as a recommended title in the Steam store. But the reviews showed overwhelmingly positive, and again, thinking that somebody had recommended it here anyways, I decided I would go ahead and snatch this one up, and boy howdy am I glad I did because this thing is just so charming it almost makes Farm Together look sinister by comparison. In Little Gator Game, predictably you play as a little gator. And for reasons I won't spoil here, he is absolutely laser focused on LARPing his favorite adventure game. In short order, you'll meet your little gator's buddies who will help you along on your adventure and flesh out the larger story. It's colorful, relaxing, and filled with whimsical adventure that is both challenging and completely non-threatening. You really should just see it for yourself, especially if you can get it on sale sometime, because while it's a short adventure, it's definitely shaping up to be a memorable one. Performance-wise, it runs perfectly smooth on the deck, and just like a short hike before it, it has this really neat ability to make the graphics smooth or crunchy, and both look really great. And honestly, I just love that they saw fit to include a mode that would make it look like a DS game, and I absolutely can't wait to see how this story wraps up. And finally, the last game on this list that I picked up would be Builder's Journey. I've always loved LEGO in real life, so it's always been pretty easy for me to enjoy LEGO video games, but unlike a lot of the adventure-focused LEGO titles like the Harry Potter collection or LEGO DC Supervillains, this one's more of a puzzle story experience. Each new area gives you a few pieces to work with as you place them where they need to be to progress the story or to move your character around some light platforming. It's a very calming game to play, and I really love how it's literally building the narrative purely through placing Lego bricks. As a minimalist puzzle experience, you can push the graphics pretty well on the Steam Deck, and just like Farm Together doesn't have any super fast action to worry about, even if you do take a frame rate hit, I'm not sure that it makes a ton of difference in a game like this. That is, unless you personally find it annoying, but long story short, the default settings are perfectly fine, and you can bump things up a bit if you want, obviously. But either way, I think this one's going to be a lot of fun to work through on a lazy Sunday or something, mostly thanks to the very simple presentation of its graphics and a very chill soundtrack. Alright, that's about it for this one, at least some of the highlights of the games I bought, because I am positive that I broke down and bought some more games by the time this video goes live, but hey, what about you? Have you already just, taken full advantage of the spring sale, and if so, are there any gems that you would recommend, or games that you're just having more fun with than you thought you would? If so, please let me know in the comments below. As always, I very much appreciate you taking the time out of your day to watch videos here. It means a lot to me. Take care, and I'll see you on the next video. Bye.